Thank you, everyone, for your time today. We very much appreciate it. David just did a fantabulous job with his introduction to my letter, which I'm going to lean heavily on for today's discussion. I think it's important. I encourage everyone to read it. It's at millervalue.com. And again, it's called The World's Biggest Buyer is Back, and people don't get it. Um, the overall message in the letter is pretty simple. What you read in the newspapers and what you hear from politicians is not indicative of what's going on at all among monetary policymakers. So in December, we just saw the biggest shift in Fed policy in at least 6 years. If you read the headline the next day in the Wall Street Journal, it says Fed cuts rates, signals a pause. Sounds like a very hawkish meeting at the margin. In reality, what they failed to mention in that article and what they published on a later page in a much more mundane title is that quantitative tightening just ended. So what's been going on effectively for the past 3 to 4 years is the Fed's been talking out of both sides of their mouths. So they've been saying, oh, we're cutting rates, cutting rates, cutting rates. Yeah, that's great. But if you look at what they're actually doing, they're allowing their balance sheet to shrink. So we've seen the biggest shrinkage in liquidity over the past 3 to 4 years in the history of the United States Federal Reserve. And so the shift in December is incredibly significant because there's a handful of ways that the Fed can influence monetary policy, asset prices, and activity across the economy. One is through target interest rates. Two is through setting expectations and communicating to the market what they're planning on doing. And three is by actually injecting or changing liquidity balance that's available for economic activity. And so what happened was while they were, again, cutting rates, they were removing liquidity. And so what just happened in December was they completely changed course on that. And instead of sucking $50 billion a month of liquidity out of the system, they are now providing $40 billion a month of liquidity into the system. And so people don't appreciate how important this is. They did it just in the nick of time, too. If you look at the most recent Trueflation readings, which have live up-to-date data around inflation, more relevant, I would say, than the government data, they're at 1.45% today, year over year. So they have plenty of room to do this, provide more liquidity, and get things going again. At the same time, the economy is still in pretty good shape, even though we're seeing some cracks in the labor market. Atlanta Fed now shows this quarter's GDP at 5.4%. And again, rates, the labor market is still expanding wages are expanding at 3.8%, which is meaningfully above that 1.4% I mentioned. So you're seeing real wage growth. You're seeing the Fed injecting liquidity into the market like they haven't done in years. And things are actually really good. All of this tends to favor what we own. And we're incredibly optimistic about where we're headed as an economy and where our portfolios are going. And so we're just beginning to see the effects of this liquidity. Liquidity injections are far more direct and operate with far less of a lag than interest rate targeting. And so, again, we're just at the very beginning here of an overall economic acceleration, strengthening labor market, and accelerating economy. And again, if you look at Bitcoin, it peaked kind of last year as liquidity stuff was tightening and bad things were happening behind the scenes. If you're following geekish interest rates and spreads that were blowing out, and things that the Fed was very worried about. Well, I think the bottom in Bitcoin's in.